What if I told you that the most powerful bankers in history were not wearing tailored suits on Wall Street, or sitting behind massive mahogany desks in modern London, but were heavily armed monks wearing chainmail armor who realized that the real absolute power in this world was not found in holy relics or swinging a broadsword, but in controlling the flow of international wealth across violent borders without anyone realizing it? Welcome to Money's Hidden Past. Rich people lied, we fact-checked. Today, we are traveling back to the bloody 12th century to uncover the financial empire of the Knights Templar. Most of us know the Templars from movies and video games as holy crusaders guarding the deep secrets of the church, but behind the massive stone walls and the white mantles, they were actually running the world's first multinational bank. Let us set the scene in the chaotic year of 1119. The First Crusade had just violently captured Jerusalem, and thousands of European pilgrims suddenly wanted to visit the most sacred and highly contested sites in the world. But the journey from Europe to the Middle East was an absolute nightmare of logistics and terror. It took months of traveling through heavily hostile territories, and to survive, you had to bring your entire life. Savings traveling with a giant heavy sack of physical gold coins was essentially putting a massive neon target on your back. Bandits, pirates, and corrupt local lords were everywhere just waiting to slaughter pilgrims and take their cash. If you were a wealthy noble wanting to fund an army, the logistics were mathematically impossible to manage. You could not carry enough gold to feed 1,000 men without needing a second army just to guard the money. Enter a small group of 9 impoverished French knights who took strict vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, and they promised to protect pilgrims on the dangerous roads. But they quickly realized a fundamental truth of economics: protecting people's physical bodies was incredibly dangerous. But protecting their money was a highly scalable business model, and the Templar financial machine was officially born. They invented a system that we completely take for granted today, but in the Middle Ages, it was absolute pure magic. They created the medieval equivalent of an international ATM, stretching from the rainy streets of London to the Middle East. Here is how this revolutionary system actually worked. A pilgrim in Paris could walk into the local Templar church, hand over a heavy chest of physical gold and silver, and leave the building carrying absolutely nothing at all. Nothing except a small piece of heavily encrypted parchment known as a letter of credit or a bill of exchange. This document used complex ciphers only the Templars knew, verifying exactly how much money the pilgrim had deposited. The pilgrim could then travel across the entire known world, getting robbed by bandits who found absolutely nothing of value, arrive safely in the burning heat of the Holy Land walk into the Templar headquarters, and present the note the local Templar clerk would verify the secret cipher check, his massive leather-bound financial ledgers, and hand the pilgrim the exact equivalent in local currency, minus a small hidden administrative fee. Of course, with this one brilliant operational innovation, the Templars solved the ultimate problem of global trade. They completely detached the value of human money from the highly dangerous physical transportation of gold. It was not just the simple transfer of gold either. The Templars practically invented foreign exchange markets. They understood that the currency of Paris was different, and they baked lucrative exchange rates into their transfers. They also became the world's absolute safest deposit box. Because if you are a king writing a highly sensitive treaty or leaving behind a complex will for your royal successors, you do not trust your own treacherous family to guard it. You trust the heavily armed religious zealots down the street who answer to absolutely no one except the Pope himself. Their fortresses became the ultimate Swiss bank accounts holding the most valuable documents and treasures in Europe. But the Templars ran into a massive legal problem because they were a devout Catholic military order. And the Catholic Church strictly outlawed the practice of usury, which meant charging any interest on a loan was a mortal sin. You could actually be excommunicated and sent to hell just for charging someone a simple 5% interest rate. So how do you build a massive global banking empire? If your own religion strictly forbids you from making a profit, necessity breeds the most spectacular financial loopholes, and the Templars were absolute masters of the gray area. When a wealthy European duke decided to go on crusade, he needed a massive amount of upfront cash to buy weapons. The Templars would happily give him a giant cash loan and completely honor the church rule of zero interest. But in exchange, they would hold the deed to his estate and take total management control of his massive farmlands, while the duke was away. Fighting in the Middle East for 3 or 4 highly dangerous and bloody years, the Templars kept every single penny of profit that the duke's estate generated from crops and local taxes. They did not call this profit interest because that was a sin. They called it a temporary administrative rent collection. By the time the duke returned and paid back the principal, the Templars had quietly doubled their money on the back end. This incredible loophole made the order unimaginably wealthy. They stopped being just a simple military organization and transitioned into the ultimate corporate powerhouse. managing the wealth of kings, popes, and entire nations. They built a massive fleet of custom cargo ships. They owned the island of Cyprus entirely outright. They controlled thousands of massive fortified castles, and they became the official royal treasury of France. The King of France literally kept all of his national wealth inside the massive, impenetrable Templar fortress in Paris, and this is exactly where the fairy tale turns into a nightmare, because the Templars became a victim of their own success. By the early 1300s, the Crusades were failing, the Holy Land had been completely lost to Islamic forces, and the Templars had lost their original military purpose. But they were still the richest organization on the planet. Enter King Philip IV of France, a monarch who was completely and disastrously broke. He had fought massive expensive wars against the English, and he owed the Templars a staggering amount of money. Philip realized a brutal truth of ancient high finance: when you owe the bank $1,000, that is your problem. But when a king owes the bank his entire national treasury, he can just use his army to completely erase the bank on Friday. October the 13th, 1307, a date that many historians believe created the superstition. King Philip launched a massive, highly coordinated raid arresting every single Templar across the entire country. He could not exactly arrest them for being too good at math, so he used the ultimate weapon of the medieval world. He accused them of heresy, devil worship, and dark magic, forcing the Pope to officially disband the entire order. The Templars were brutally tortured until they confessed their massive assets and properties were completely seized, and their top leaders were burned alive at the stake, watching their entire global empire instantly vanish into smoke. But the King of France never actually found the grand treasure. The massive vaults of physical gold they supposedly held were mysteriously empty when the king's men broke down the doors, sparking centuries of wild conspiracies and treasure hunts. The reality is much more intelligent and much more modern. The treasure was not giant piles of gold coins in a basement. The treasure was the global financial system they had invented: the ledgers, the debts, the credits, and the network of trust. When the king burned the bankers, he destroyed the network, and the wealth simply evaporated into the medieval air. The Templars did not die because they lost the Holy Land. They died because they held the massive debt of a desperate king. They proved that pooling wealth and creating lines of credit could fund massive armies and build empires across continents. But they also proved that being the biggest bank in the world is incredibly dangerous if you do not control the government. So the next time you tap your plastic debit card at a store, or use your phone to send money instantly across the globe, remember the heavily armed monks who invented the concept and paid for that brilliant financial innovation with their lives. If this deep dive into the warrior bankers of the Middle Ages and the bloody invention of international credit fired you up about understanding how the global economy was actually built, then do me a favor right now. Smash that like button to let the algorithm know this conversation matters. Share this video with every friend and family member who loves stories of how wealth and power are truly created. Let us keep exposing what they do not want you to see. I will catch you in the next one, where we break down the next hidden chapter in the history of money and absolute power. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and remember that sometimes your greatest financial asset can also be your death warrant.